ish exploration of one fellow's translation of the Christian scriptures, one chapter, or in this week's case, two chapters at a time. I'm Brandon Rhodes, and across the internet from me, as always, is the translator himself, Brandon Johnson. Hi, Brandon.
Brandon.
It has been like almost 2 months since we last recorded in Hebrews. This has been crazy. We've been a little busy in life, haven't we?
We have. It's been quite the season.
Yeah, boy. I've opened the bookstore. You are now fully certified and blessed by the state as a counselor.
Full license. Yep.
Licensure, that's the word. Yeah. So, and much more besides, boy. So I'm glad to get back into this. Hebrews has been, we were talking before the show, everybody, that for me, Hebrews has not had quite as many little eye-opening shifts, but it's been easily the most surprising. Some of these big ideas have been very epical and like consequential, but I have been so delighted with the surprise of the depth of all of these things here. So I'm excited to get to, after this like long like break away from recording, to get to continue talking about this with you.
Yeah, it's a little disjointed with the big breaks, but it's been worth it. It's been very interesting.
Yeah. There was like some part of me this summer was like, do we need to re-record everything? And then I was like, no, that'll be another 3 years. So we were recording this in early October. I believe we began recording Hebrews in April.
Sounds right.
So yeah, it's been a little bonkers. So we're going to be going through, let's see, chapters 10 and 11 today. So if you have any familiarity with Hebrews in the church, this is one of those places you're going to know about, whether you are Roman Catholic or any flavor Protestant or Orthodox or anything. Like, everybody knows, like, here in Protestant land, we also got like the shock and awe of like, was it chapters 5 and 6 with some of those proof texts for Calvinism, but everybody knows the halls of faithfulness, of the halls of faith, right? Here are the legends and the all-stars. So we're going to go through that today and try and set some things straight. Yeah. Let's down-regulate everybody's expectations. That was the
I was like, set things straight. I'm like, it's quite a claim. I don't know, but yeah.
All right, we're gonna under promise and over deliver. It might be okay.
Maybe.
Listen or not, we don't care. There may be something, there may be nothing. Let's get this thing up on the screen here, and we will talk it through. So can you give us a little context of where 10 and 11 are in the flow of Hebrews?
Yeah.
After this 2-month deviation.
Right. All right. So Hebrews starts with the sense of, we're talking about God speaking through a son as opposed to prophets or other kinds of messengers, such as potentially angels, but also natural phenomenon, all sorts of things. Like, but this is different. Is kind of that first couple of chapters is just like, this is different, people. And then gets into chapter 6 with the this is like, you can't be reaping the benefits of this kind of liberation, of this teaching, of what the Son is bringing to the table, if you're actively hostile and hurting each other at the same time. It doesn't work.
Right.
Um, so the sense of peace and collaboration and cooperation and sharing with each other is a necessary component, not because it's earning you, but because it's literally contradictory if you're not doing those things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and then it goes into several chapters of very, to us modern Westerners, very esoteric stuff about the temple and sacrifices and priesthood. That all I kind of say again, this is different, is kind of the point. Like, whereas that stuff was pointing to a higher reality, that was a ritual that was done over and over to help bring awareness to the realities of things aren't on track the way they're intended to be.
Yeah.
Um, this is not just bringing awareness, it's actually changing it,
Mm.
bringing the higher reality into being instead of just pointing to that higher reality.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the quick slide through the first 9 chapters.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which brings us even into the first verse there, since Torah contains a silhouette of the coming beneficial things, not the actual statue itself. They had to bring the sacrifices over and over.
Right.
So that chapter 10 is a good kind of summary. That first paragraph there is a kind of a good summary of like, this is what we've been talking about this for the last several chapters.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Yeah. Like each of these things had some sense of limitation, and the sense of like the full dimensionality of it is found in Christ, goes the argument.
Mm-hmm.
So the first passage we're going to talk about is chapter 10, verse 16. Can you scroll down to that one, sir?
We are.
So the operative phrase here, before you read it out, is going to be, while imparting my instructions on their hearts, and I will write them on their ways of thinking. Can you give us some context reading here?
Yeah, I'll just read that whole little paragraph. Sacred life breath tells us about this very thing, since after having stated, "This is the covenant I will make with them after those days," says the Lord, "while imparting my instructions on their hearts, and I will write them on their ways of thinking." Then she states, "Their deviations and their actions that are devoid of Torah, I absolutely won't still call to mind. So where there is a letting go of these things, there is no longer an offering concerning deviations."
Hmm. Hmm.
So, yeah, that sense of I'm going to actually transform people from the inside out. And there's no point in trying to like tally up all the wrongs that have been done. We're moving forward, people. I'm not going to make you pay back for all the wrongs you've done in the past. Right? Um, the biggest shifts there are the word in instructions and the ways of thinking, a way of thinking. Uh, Typically, instructions there is laws. Um,
While imparting
and
my
it's
laws on their hearts.
right, right. And so the point is like the word there is referenced back to the Hebrew Torah, even though this is in Greek, so it's namas, but it's a reference back to like namas is the Greek translation of the Hebrew Torah, or in this case, Torah is the plural.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's instructions, it's teaching, direction, like
Yes.
do these things, training. The it's not laws like the government legal code. Like
Mm-hmm.
there was an element of the ways to live with each other as a faith community was
Yeah.
also the Israelite governmental structure because it was overlapping. But that's not the point of it, is that it was the laws. The point of it is it's the instructions for how to walk the path of the
Mm-hmm.
live the way of the Lord, right? Um, so it's going to be transformed by being in their hearts. There, and I think we've talked about before, heart in this context isn't about emotions, it's about desires and motivations. So it's going to have what I want to do, what I desire to do, what I'm motivated to do from the inside out is live this way that fits with the Lord's instructions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and I will write them on their way of thinking. The word thoughts there is not a wrong translation. Um, it's just it's bigger than like a thought that I have in this moment. It's not like an instance of a thought. It's how I
Yeah.
think. It's bigger than that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
So I'm
bigger
trying to
than,
emphasize that here.
yeah. Yeah. Like the sacred life breath doing this work through Christ is much more than now you have an info dump of new doctrines and ideas and
Mm-hmm.
passages to proof texts slap each other with. That's not what's being talked about here. Like now you have
Yeah.
new factoids.
Or I would hear it like, I thought about a woman's body. I have sinned, and
Yeah,
now God's going to make it so that I don't think about those things. It's like, no, that's not.
right.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, this translation really getting at like this is a way of metabolizing and imagining and envisioning reality, the totality of how we um, proceed through the world and let
Mm-hmm.
it proceed through us is like this is a way of thinking, not a worldview. No, no, we are not trying to
Mm-mm.
copy paste some sort of mythic biblical worldview into like the divine is not looking at this, is not looking for that. This is a Christ consciousness that inhabits and it intercarnates in each of us and in us together. This is a
Mm-hmm.
more than having a new kind of doctrines and interesting points about God.
Right.
That like that is so passive, receptive, defensive, flat, sterile, uninteresting, honestly. And I say that as
Yeah.
for all the Enneagram people out there as a 5. Like I love all those things. That is not what the F God is doing to us. Having the mind of Christ, as we hear in Romans, is so much richer, fuller, and
Mm-hmm.
an active like way of processing reality.
Yeah. And we'll get more clearly. I mean, we already touched on it in chapter 6. Chapter 12 will also be really clear of what kind of way is it of thinking is it
Yes.
talking about.
Yes, it
Um,
is. Read ahead if you want to
sneak
try
peek,
finding what
it's
that is.
basically like, don't be just looking out for number one over and against the needs of others. It's not
Mm-hmm.
about competition. It's not about deciding who's in and out, making sure I'm in and others are out. It's all about like it's being inclusive, it's being peacemaking, it's being kind and caring for everyone, community
Mm-hmm.
collaboration for needs being met, not competitive, self-seeking needs being met.
Yes. And that way of seeing is in no small part born out of a new way of desiring, that sense of, as you were speaking,
Mm-hmm.
like the heart is not where feelings are, the heart is in the like Hebrew imagination where it's the seat of desire, and that is
Mm-hmm.
the the mercy seat, the throne of the divine in us is in the desires, is in the affections. And
Yeah.
so
So
when
what
you do,
exactly is it that we desire? Yeah.
yeah. And then as you desire differently, you think differently, you process
Hmm.
differently, you are considering the needs of others because you love them. Your desire is born out of a sense of loving faithfulness, the loving faithfulness of Yahweh to creation and to us critters is animating us to be in solidarity and liberation with all those the world doesn't give a shit about.
Hmm. Yeah. Especially the ones the world doesn't give a shit about.
Yeah, yeah, especially yeah. The stone the builder has rejected has become the
Hmm.
cornerstone of our desires, our heart, and our imagination. Our
Hmm.
imagination and consciousness might be another way of saying our ways of thinking.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a pretty epic shift for like not that gratuitous of a translation change.
Yeah. Just pulled it straight out of the dictionary.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think a lot of even like preachers could read through that, and um, some of them might catch a little bit of it if they had to preach on it with this translation.
Hmm.
But just
Yeah.
reading it
Just reading
through,
over
it's
it quickly, you might miss it. Yeah.
yeah, it's like that registers, which is it. I mean, that's nice. It
Hmm.
it feels more harmonious. I want to acknowledge there that you've also got the gendering of the sacred life breath um,
Hmm.
as she.
Yeah. Which there isn't a pronoun there at all. It's not like I changed it from he to she. It's just and for clarity's sake, everybody adds something in there. Like he said is usually what it says. And it's like, well, they're adding he, well, she, because it's talking about sacred life breath, which isn't a masculine word in the Greek or Hebrew. So
There you go. That is fair game. Okay, let's move down to chapter 10, verse 22. Gosh, these long sentences.
I know, yeah. Where does that actually start? 19. It starts all the way back at 19. It
Why don't you
ends
start reading at 19 and
at end of 22.
I'll give a little
Okay.
sound effect when we get to 22.
Okay. All right. Therefore, family, since we have freedom to speak within the entrance of the sacred place on the basis of the blood of Jesus, which he initiated for us as a fresh and current path through the curtain, that is, by means of his body, and the great priest over the house of God.
Ba, 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 ba.
There you go. We can approach with a sincere heart on the basis of the complete accomplishment of faithfulness, with our heart having been sprinkled for cleansing from simple awareness of harm, and the body having been washed with clean water.
Woo.
It's a little wordy.
Many words of the Lord.
Yes.
So
Oh,
yeah, what are the big ones here?
yeah. So it's that verse 22. I where often is assurance, I have accomplishment. Um, and where it's often faith, I have faithfulness. So it's we on the basis of complete assurance of faith, which honestly doesn't really make sense because it's talking about Jesus having done something. And then all of a sudden it's talking about our assurance of like, no, it's we can approach with a sincere heart because of what Jesus accomplished when he was faithful, not because we are confident in our faith. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what would that even really mean?
Yeah, or the security of knowing that, you know, Protestantism's favorite or greatest hits is true, basically, is kind of what
Hmm.
I hear at this point, is
Yeah.
because we know that we are saved
Or
by grace through faith, or faith through grace, whatever.
mhm. Yeah, I was say, or it gets used as we can go to heaven when we die because we we believe the right things, and we can be sure that that means we get to go to heaven when we die.
Mm-hmm. And so that loops back to the previous topic we were just talking about, where if it's because the Holy Spirit has like given us a new data dump of like intellectual facts to consent to, therefore we have complete assurance of faith being very left brain.
Hmm. Which is so the opposite, because that's getting into how do we know we're in instead of out, which is like the opposite of the way of thinking that's being
Yeah.
written on our hearts. Yeah. Ugh.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
yeah, like the way of thinking that's being written on our hearts is thinking and minding who is being left out of God's shalom in the world, in their time in this world.
Hmm.
What can we
Which it
do?
spends,
Yeah.
that's one of the points I glossed over that I didn't include in the summary, but it spends a lot of time about not being included in God's rest and paying attention to who is going to be left out of that and making sure they're not left out of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Like it's the Protestants and evangelical in particular fixation and anxiety is so grounded in a certain level of doubt that is in turn grounded in this belief that God is pleased to send us all away and leave us out. So, how, given that starting point that we're all fucked because of a holy God, and that's a weird
Hmm.
notion of holy, then, well, how in the world am I not effed? Well, it's faith in Jesus, which is based on these certain facts about how I can't be saved by works, or he took the wrath
Hmm.
from God on the whatever, like whatever the like important points there are. And it tends to be something really either cerebral or escape from violence there.
Hmm.
Therefore, I feel secure in that. What does that have to do with anything else going on? It's so selfish. It's such a false belief in God. That is not a
Hmm.
God worthy of worship. It's a completely different story than the story of Judaism or the early
Yeah.
church.
Hmm. And if you really think about it, there's nothing about after anyone dies being discussed anywhere in Hebrews.
Yeah.
That's not what the story is about.
Yeah. And some of you may be thinking, what about the thing that they say at the end of chapter 11? We will get to that. That isn't about heaven
Hmm.
after earth.
Right.
Thanks be to God.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if that's not the story into which we hear this passage, what's a what does this passage do with this translation and a better story being told?
Like this verse.
Yeah, what the complete accomplishment of faithfulness. Like it's the faithfulness
Hmm.
of Jesus, right?
Yeah. Well, it's going back to that transformation of the heart, right? We can approach presence of God passing through the curtain, which
Yeah.
is reference to the temple, the holy place where there's this curtain separating the outer and the inner parts of it. Um, and it's saying after Jesus, we're all invited into the most intimate presence with God.
Mm.
And we can approach with a sincere heart, with a heart that desires the things that God desires. And that is because of, on the basis of
Mm.
Jesus's complete accomplishment of faithfulness.
Yes.
And that our heart having been sprinkled for cleansing, again, I don't know if it's again, I don't remember how much we've talked about this, but the sprinkling, it makes it really clear in Hebrews that it's not about it took away the deviations, took away the sins. It's about this inauguration of ribbon cutting, just like the tabernacle was sprinkled. Wasn't because it was a bad tabernacle before, a sinful tabernacle, and that had to be made
Like
into a
there's blood
good
on your
tabernacle.
hands, like you're sprinkling guilt on people. That's not
Yeah.
what's happening.
No, it was about designating it for sacred purposes. And it's the same thing here, as it's inaugurating the now you're being called to this purpose. So you've been sprinkled for cleansing,
Yes.
being made designated for these sacred purposes, being and that designation moves you away from the sacrifices previously have just been to create awareness of harm. And now it's actually saying, we're going to do something about it and create goodness, benefit,
Yes.
help,
Yes.
grace, and not just, well, that's harmful. I should try to avoid that. Like, there's a different level of transformation happening there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
And
there's
pointing
a,
out, too, that awareness of harm is traditionally like evil conscience. So it's like, it's not, again, it's not went from being an evil tabernacle to a good tabernacle. It's not an evil consciousness to a good consciousness. It's a consciousness that was aware of evil, aware of harm.
yes. Yeah. 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 It's not because the big story that's holding this is not, you should know that you are a piece of shit, that you have broken the
Mm-hmm,
rules, and God has written the laws on your heart, which helps you know all the ways you're a piece of shit rule breaker. And therefore now you've been sprinkled with being caught red-handed, so to speak, which is such an anachronism, but I think that's the passive perception of a lot of the church. And
mm-hmm.
now you've been cleansed
Yeah.
from that guilt to proceed. It's no, you've had, God has broken the champagne bottle over the bow of his people. Like, it's the
Mm-hmm.
same thing. It's just as weird to crack a bottle of champagne on whatever you're like ribbon cutting, or to cut a
Mm-hmm.
ribbon, as like, it does seem extremely strange to me, the idea of
Mm-hmm.
sprinkling blood. Like, let's dip some
Well,
hyssop and flick it.
it's because I think we've talked about this before, but it's worth repeating because it's so foreign and so misunderstood.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the sprinkling of the blood, the pouring of the blood, the sacrifices, the killing of the animals, none of it was at the point to kill, to make something die. Never, ever, ever is that the point. Point is to have access to using the blood as a symbol of life. Without blood, we're not alive. I'm not advocating for doing that, which Hebrews doesn't either. Uh,
Yeah.
but that's what it meant. Is I am putting life over this. I'm covering this with life. Anytime you're sprinkling blood, you're covering life over
Mm.
everything. It's saying, here's some life.
Wow.
Not
Okay.
I needed death in order to be satisfied.
Yeah. Yeah. It's literally the backwards sense of what's happening.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So this translation frees us up to have a better sense of like it's from that to, yeah, you are covered in life for life in the life of Christ, that eschatological trajectory that God has brought forward in Jesus
Mhm.
and the Jesus people. So let's keep going here. That was fun.
Mhm.
I want to get to into chapter 11. I think we just need to do the entire 11th verse or first verse, excuse me.
First verse. Yeah.
11:1. Oof.
Yeah. This is one where I'm definitely going to want to compare it to a
Oh
more
yeah, I've got the
traditional.
NIV queued up here.
Okay, good, good. All right. So now, faithfulness is the groundwork for the things being hoped for, a trial run of the circumstances that aren't yet seen. Should I read that again?
Read the whole paragraph actually, but yeah.
Okay.
Because this is just before
All
it's
right.
going to go into like with faithfulness. It's this is the
Right, right, right.
yeah.
Okay. Here's the first paragraph, which is the first three verses. Now, faithfulness is the groundwork for the things being hoped for, a trial run of the circumstances that aren't yet seen. With this, those who came before us were shown to be genuine. We recognize that with faithfulness, the ages have been arranged with a statement from God for making what wasn't clearly visible to be seen.
So good. So the typical translation there, when evangelicals like need to have believe that there is a like actual like almost dictionary kind of definition of faith in their scriptures, our scriptures. Um, they go to this one. Well, what
Mhm.
is faith? Well, here it is in the New International Version. Now, faith is confidence in what we hope for, and assurance about what we do not see. I'm going to read that one more time. Now, faith is confidence in what we hope for, and assurance about what we do not see.
It's defining it as blind faith.
It's yeah, literally defining it as blind faith. Like, and it's done through all of the like petty culture wars and and arguments that the fundamentalist strain of the faith has had over the years. These aren't unimportant arguments, but like naturalism versus supernaturalism. Is there a God or is there not a God? Are there angels? Are there miracles? Is there a heaven? Like, well, we have like faith is believing or having, what's the word? Assurance
Mhm.
that we believe in, we blindly believe in these invisible things that we cannot see. Boring.
Mhm.
Also, that is such a bringing backwards 2 millennia in like which freaking Hebrew or Christian is arguing like we believe in the invisible things.
Right. Yeah, think about this. This was written to Hebrews. Like these are people that all already believed
Yeah,
God existed. Like
yeah,
basic assumption. This is not a new
yes.
idea. Right.
Yeah, like that would not be a novel thing for really anybody in the ancient
Mhm.
world. Like it's a fairly recent thing that you can be kind of public, particularly in the West, about not believing in a deity. So
Yeah.
it's not what's happening here.
Yeah, this isn't even about 21st century answers to 15th century 16th century questions like the NT Wright references. This is 21st century answers to like 18th century questions
Mm.
supposedly being written in the first century.
It's it's so bewilderingly like intellectually poor taste and
Maybe
like
19th
it
century. Yeah.
epitomizes this like weird proof texty navel gazing that happens in
hmm
I think a lot of the like if you're listening to this it's probably because you've had some sense of having to disassociate and detangle yourself from more conservative branches of Christianity. And boy, one of the things they do is these weird proof texts.
hmm
And in the case of
Yeah.
this, like it's the entire arc of Hebrews, they keep on shoehorning in these weird ideas of like faith being believing in something invisible in in spite of either those Catholics who believe they have to earn their faith or those atheists who don't believe in anything at all. Like that's not what the frick they're talking about.
hmm Yeah. Those conversations were not a thing yet.
No, no, sure. So
Yeah.
you have something, but we have a hope that is better than that, and it is your
hmm
translation.
Yeah, it's talking about this. There's something that we're hoping for, this a reality where everyone has the mind of Christ written on their hearts, where everyone's
Oh,
desires are and way of thinking is about this communal way of life,
yes,
where everyone is taken care of and has their needs met, and no one's deviating and harming each other, pushing other people out. It's everyone's being included. So if that's what's being hoped for, the promise to Abraham is referenced in the last chapter there, where all peoples
yes,
are declared to be where they are spoken well over through your seed, which is clearly identified as Jesus in the New Testament. So, if that's what's being hoped for, that reality coming to fullness,
mm,
the people who are currently actively part of the community being faithful is the groundwork for that. It's the trial run for those circumstances that aren't yet visible because they don't exist fully yet, right? It's just getting it started. Jesus was the first. So this next generation of disciples and apostles were the next, all the way to us, right?
yeah,
That's what it's talking about, not this like definition of what does the word faith mean.
yeah, yeah, yeah. By the way, fun fact: faith is this. Not it. That's
Right.
not. No, no. Yeah, whether it's the faithfulness of Jesus in the first century or the faithfulness of the saints before or after,
Which then the
faithfulness.
rest of this chapter is giving examples of the saints before.
Yes, yeah. Faithfulness is the groundwork for what is being hoped for. So there is some sense in which um, a life lived in their moment in the story
hmm
to God, like a fidelity, a sacred fidelity, is the
Right.
groundwork for the things being hoped for, which is a humanity fully Christified, a cosmos
hmm
Christified, a
hmm
trial, and it's a trial run for the circumstances that aren't yet seen. So it's preparatory for later on in the story.
Right.
That's incredible. It's empowering to consider that um, my life and whatever stumbling notion of sacred fidelity, faithfulness that is in me, in the saints here in the watershed I live in, is a groundwork for, it's an ongoing part of the work towards God, of the world and life and age to come.
Mm-hmm.
Heaven on earth. And it'll help people down the road, hopefully,
Mm-hmm.
in them being joined to this great temple of new creation. That makes so much more sense of where it's going, instead of, by the way,
otherwise
Protestantism
that
is
verse
right.
is,
Also, let's talk about all these Hebraic characters.
yeah, it doesn't have any connection to what came before
Yeah.
or after. It's just like, here's a dictionary definition for you. Now we'll continue on with a regularly scheduled program.
Stanley
That's all.
Hauerwas, the great Methodist theologian out on the East Coast, says evangelicalism's chief sin is thinking that it invented Christianity.
Gosh.
Yeah. 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 I can't dispute it. Boy, that really changed. So let's acknowledge here that like the flow of the rest of the chapter is going through with faithfulness versus faith.
Yeah. Instead of by faith, Abel presented a more significant sacrificial offering. Instead of by faith, Enoch was transferred. By faith, Noah gave careful attention. By faith, Abraham listened. It's with faithfulness or faithfully. It's in line with the way that we're talking about faithfulness in the first paragraph of the chapter, that faithfully living in the way that is a groundwork for what's being hoped for, the trial run of what's not yet seen. These are people who have done that.
Yes.
These are the ways that making what isn't yet visibly real everywhere, there are snapshots of examples of what it looks like.
Yeah. What they hoped for and believed in that is not seen, adding the word yet there, or bringing that into focus, is really the operative thing. The thing that is not seen is new creation.
New
World,
creation, the great jubilee, all the things,
heaven on earth. And so let's jump down to verse 39 and 40, the conclusion of this stretch. Though these people were all shown to be genuine by faithfulness, they did not experience the promise of God, who foresaw something better concerning us, that they would not be made complete without us.
Yeah. We're part of that trajectory of the things not yet seen coming to be seen.
Yeah.
And the promise of God is the promise to Abraham.
Yes.
That's what that's referring to there.
Yeah. And that sense of we all complete one another, both in the local sense of in a local community, our faithfulness completes one another, right? Like I am incomplete apart from the those who are different from me here, but that's also true. It's not just the systems of death like patriarchy and homophobia and racism and capitalism that alienates us that we overcome and complete one another's faithfulness, but it's even death itself which cannot separate us from one another. There's this sense in which we are part of the saint's story, like in verse 40 there, and theirs is our, like, we all complete one another because we complete Christ together. Today we are recording this on St. Francis feast day. And so that tradition,
I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So that tradition of remembering and celebrating a certain present tenseness to the saints is one of these historic ways that the church has intuited and made manifest with sacred rhythm the legacy of faithfulness that is continued on after Christ in the present tense of you and I, and how their stories can form us and continue to incarnate in us.
Yeah. And I just point out that as I have this up on the screen, we get all the way to footnote GGG in this chapter.
Ooh, I love it. That you were breaking your word processor making this, brother.
Yeah. A lot of it is Hebrew Bible citations.
Yeah.
There's just so many in this chapter. But.
One final thing to point out here. We're almost at the end of our allotted time to be able to record, but I loved what you pointed out here in, what is it?
Yeah.
11:11. This is such a great example of how patriarchy just sort of like man translates things.
And
definitely like Ken's Barbie pretty badly here.
Yeah. So with faithfulness, Sarah, who was infertile, also herself received ability to conceive when she was at the age that she was, which she considered to be the one who, since she considered the one who made the promise faithful. So it seems pretty clearly about her, right? And the Greek is definitely she. There's no room for that to be translated as he. It's only possible for that to be translated as she. Let me, by contrast, read the New English translation, the NET. By faith, even though Sarah herself was barren and he was too old, he received the ability to procreate because he regarded the one who had given the promise to be trustworthy. It's like this verse that's very clearly about Sarah. Apparently NET and others feel like, you know what, let's have this be about Abraham instead, because he's the guy, so he's the one that's important.
Son of a bitch. It's just such gratuitous like erasure of the faithfulness of women.
Yeah, some of these changes, like, okay, I can see how you got there, but this one, it's like there is no option for that being translated as he.
Yeah. So thank you for your part in continuing the story of Sarah.
Yes.
May her faithfulness be made complete in yours in this translation and in ours in its hearing.
I am working to lay the groundwork for my part for the things that are not yet seen.
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for your company on this leg of the journey. The easiest way to support Found in Translation is to leave us a rating or review on whatever app or player you've been enjoying this on, or website that makes it easier for more people to find the show. Second best way to support the show is to become a sponsor for just $5 a month. When you do that, you get comment access on the Translations Google Doc and the satisfaction that you are supporting exceptionally nerdy independent media. You can find the link to join the community in the show notes. The music you're listening to is by Kevin MacLeod at Incompetech.com. Found in Translation was produced by Perry FM on unceded Chinook and Kalapuya land. Goodbye, Brandon.
Brandon.
Bye, everybody.